So I think it's actually perfect that we have that extra 15 minutes because what I wanted to do today for the very start of the class was to just talk about a very important topic for all of you. And it's open questions as we go. And then I promise we'll get more into the movement afterwards. But something that Alana, the respiratory physiotherapist that many of you are familiar with, she sometimes jumps on with us. We had a really good conversation about different factors of breathlessness. So that feeling of not being able to take in enough air, feeling puffed, feeling like you can't keep a regular breathing pattern. Often there's this perception we discussed. There's often this perception that it's due to low oxygen, that you're not having enough oxygen, that looking at your oximeter will show that you're low on oxygen, and how that's actually not always true, or at least that's sometimes not the key factor of what's going on. And so if we understand the different factors, you can actually understand that there's a variety of methods to go about improving that breathlessness. Rather than just thinking like, oh, I must be low on oxygen, there actually might be different things going on. So that's what we're going to spend a bit of time talking about first. And then we'll get into some movement with some education about the actual exercise. Okay. So perfect. And as you have questions, please ask them. Okay. I want this to be an open discussion. Yes, Carmen.
I think also like it's the other way around too, because how come I'm breathlessness wherein my SpO2 is normal?
Right. That's right. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about. Sometimes
it's both other way around, like it's going down or it's normal, but I don't know why there's breathlessness, like that's shortness of breath.
That's right. And that's what we're going to talk about.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so you all know that sometimes when you feel breathless, it's because you are low on oxygen. Okay, so that's one factor that we're quite familiar with. That's a common one that's brought up. Now, but that's only sometimes. Another one that often happens is air trapping. So what that means, and this leads into our breathing pattern that we go over, what sometimes happens in when you're taking that breath in and breath out, in COPD, often the lungs, they get a little overinflated because our muscles that help us breathe in and out, they're called your intercostal muscles, either through them getting tired or they're a little bit weak, just like another muscle. We're still working on strengthening them. Sometimes those muscles don't help the ribs close in. So we did talk about there's your lungs have a bit of passive recoil, like a balloon, right? We mentioned that, I think last week or the week before. So if you were to blow up a balloon, I should have brought a balloon today. What was I thinking? If you blow up a balloon and then you open up your fingers, the air comes out, right? Everyone's familiar with that? Mm-hmm. That's called your elastic recoil. That rubber, it's elastic. And so once you stretch out that rubber, it'll come back together. Well, your lung tissue, the material or tissue that makes up your lungs is also elastic. So we have a little bit of that passive recoil. Now it's not as elastic as a balloon, okay? But there is that little bit of passive recoil. The air kind of just comes out a little bit, okay? And what happens in a couple of different lung conditions, and especially COPD, is that not all the air, not as much air, I should say, comes out on your exhale as it does with someone who does not have a lung condition. So we lose a little bit of that elasticity in the lungs with COPD, and that's where that breathing pattern of breathing out through pursed lips is so, so important, because that air that gets left over in the lungs, we call it trapped air, that is keeping your lungs more inflated than normal. And it's preventing the amount of oxygen that you can inhale on your next breath. And we've gone over a little bit of that in previous classes, but now just giving you those specifics. Now, when you're taking in less new, we'll call it new air, because that new air is now full of oxygen, and that trapped air is kind of stale. We've already absorbed that oxygen. So when you're getting less oxygen coming in, it's not necessarily that you're low on oxygen. Low on oxygen meaning, oh, I just need to stop and breathe, or oh, I need to increase. If you've got an oxygen tank, oh, I just need to increase my oxygen tank. Sometimes it's actually just caused by a breathing pattern, and that breathing pattern is sometimes the solution to solving that breathlessness.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we've gone over this too, is that pursed lip exhale. What it does is that pressure of breathing out through pursed lips, and most of you are familiar with it, but now that we're just focusing on that, I want you to try it, right? Again, it's like you're breathing through a straw. You breathe in, and then through pursed lips. You can even put your hand on your belly and feel your lungs as you're breathing out. You should feel kind of your lungs pushing out the air. You might feel a little bit of tightening in your belly when you do that. And that's your diaphragm, which sits underneath the rib cage. It's contracting. Your intercostals, which are around the ribs, are contracting to push out that air. So again, do it again and really focus on the feeling of that. We breathe in and then we breathe out. Okay, can everyone feel that little bit of that muscle contraction?
Yep.
As you exhale through pursed lips? It's a purposeful exhale to help reduce that level of trapped air. Okay, so that's a second factor. Does anyone have questions on the air trapping?
Is that trapped air carbon monoxide now, or is it still oxygen?
Nope, that's right. That's right. So now you're getting higher levels of carbon dioxide in your lungs and in your system.
So
Yeah.
so therefore you're not getting the oxygen that requires you to feed your muscles and everything else in, right?
That's right.
So thus the
That's right.
tiredness, the lack of breathlessness, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and it can be, and there's a couple other factors we're going to talk about. And the reason, so I get what you're saying, Rick. You're kind of going, well, if air is being trapped and I'm not getting enough oxygen in, well, then it's kind of an oxygen problem. The reason we're getting specific on this is because the solution isn't adding more oxygen. The solution is just to fix your breathing pattern.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I notice, like, sometimes when I'm out of breath or breathlessness, if I just do the breathe through my stomach, it helps right away.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's the key difference. And that's where, so you're right. When there's air being trapped, yes, overall, you might see a decline in your oxygen numbers on your oximeter. But the reason I want to get specific again, guys, is what is the solution? Where sometimes people go, well, if I'm low on oxygen, then I need supplemental oxygen. Or if you already have supplemental oxygen, well, I just need to increase that to give myself more oxygen. Kind of like sometimes you'll have a headache and some people will choose to just take, oh, I'll just take a Tylenol. That'll get rid of my headache. And in some cases, some people will go, you know, I really have barely drinking any water today and I have a bit of a headache. I'm going to drink some water.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's about choosing the best solution.
How your oxygen is dispersed.
Pardon, Rick?
It's how your oxygen is dispersed.
More like what I'm saying is it's more what's at the root cause of that issue.
Okay.
Because you're right, there's a couple different reasons for your oxygen numbers being low. Sometimes it's, again, that amount of air being taken in. If we're not purposefully breathing out the air in our lungs, then we're getting trapped air, so we're having less fresh air coming in. Sometimes the issue with our either feelings of breathlessness or your oxygen numbers is how efficiently your body can move that oxygen around your body. Right? And so,
Yeah.
and then sometimes it's the actual uptake in your lung tissue. So sometimes it's more of a lung, it's the lung is the location where the oxygen isn't being uptaken. Sometimes it's in the capillaries, right? Which are those really, really tiny arteries and veins where and by your muscles where your body actually takes the oxygen from the bloodstream to use it. There's a couple different factors where that can be limiting how your body absorbs oxygen, for sure. Now, the third factor I wanted to talk to you about, and this one's getting more and more important as we get, it's springtime and summer. Sometimes your breathlessness is being caused by your airways being tight or inflamed, or both. So when we talk about those airways, you're all familiar with your bronchioles.
Yep.
Right? You've got your lungs, you've got your bronchioles, which are those kind of breathing tubes that travel the air you're inhaling from the mouth down into the lungs. Certain things like allergies, the heavy pollen that is in the air right now, dust, the streets are all being swept up. Some of you are in your gardens more. Okay, smoke, which fingers crossed doesn't happen. Even things like some of you may be sensitive to strong scents.
Yeah.
Right? You walk by someone who's wearing a lot of perfume or cologne, and that can be a trigger for an irritant to your airways. And when we get in contact with those irritants, what happens is we can go into those bronchial spasms or bronchospasms, because those bronchioles are a type of muscle. They're smooth muscle like most of your organs, but they're smooth muscle. And so when those get irritated, you can get some spasming, and that can create feelings of breathlessness. That's where sometimes you get a bit wheezy. Okay, has anyone ever had, last year we had a really smoky season. Who struggled with wheezing at times, right? Absolutely. And that's that's often being caused by those environmental triggers irritating those bronchioles, and now they're becoming hyperreactive, and this is very true in asthma as well. And now we're getting those muscle spasms. Okay, and with those environmental triggers, we're also getting an increase in mucus production. And mucus is important, and I know it sounds gross, but mucus is super important inside our body for keeping different types of membranes and pathways lubricated. So inside your bronchioles, so prevents them from drying out. You do not want your lungs to dry out at all, right? So because that little bit of mucus does help with, well, we won't get too far into that because that's quite a tangent, but it does help with how we absorb oxygen. It does help with keeping things clean, so fighting against infections. And that's why when there is an infection, or an environmental trigger, an allergen, an irritant, that's why we do get an increase in mucus. It's because it's our body's way of trying to flush it out. Unfortunately, it also thickens up our airways. It kind of clogs them up. Okay, and so that's where, and it's often called sputum, right? The stuff you cough up, and it's good to get that gunk out of your lungs. But that can be a reason why you're feeling breathless too, because when those airways get a bit closed up, that actual thickened or excess mucus is now narrowing your airways. Does that make sense to everybody?
Is that where your ribs and that work even harder? By the way, too, you gave me some exercises to do laying down, and right away I noticed my back ribs couldn't move, and I didn't have enough air. And there's been a few times I've woken up and I felt really good lately, asleep on my back, but not this time. It just like it shut off about a third of my capacity was how it felt. Is that what was happening, by the compression with the ribs?
Potentially, or because your shoulder's been flared up, Clancy. So what could be happening is that your thoracic spine, that upper back, has tightened up in response as a guarding, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so now those ribs might be a bit tighter. So if you've got a recliner, that can be a good in-between for those shoulder exercises to help that. So if you guys end up feeling kind of that tightness in your upper back, and then you can't get that full breath laying on your back, I highly recommend going through those shoulder exercises that we've gone over the last couple weeks. Yeah. And if laying on your back feels too constricted, just get into a recliner.
Okay.
So get that slight leaning back, because that takes some gravity off the work that your shoulders has to do, so that they can just get moving and loosen up. So try that.
Description of that fight response.
Yeah, that guarding.
Your shoulder, you can really feel that, like that,
yeah.
Or some smoke or dust. I bet physically I'm actually in gear to fight against it, right?
For sure. Yep. Does anyone else have any questions on either the air trapping piece or the airway tightness piece?
I find with the mucus buildup, if I have 2 glasses of water, it really helps by hydrating to be able to get rid of that mucus.
Yes. And that's super key, Ted, for everybody, is making sure that you're drinking enough water. And enough water is a little bit individual. Some of you may have been put on a bit of a water limit by a doctor, either for kidney issues or anything like that, or high blood pressure. But find a consistent amount of water you can have, because water is so important in your body. So you're absolutely right. It helps loosen off that mucus buildup. So instead of it being thick and gunky, now it can be a little more clear and runny. Yeah. So it actually moves through your body instead of getting stuck. It's sticky.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's lots of other super key benefits to water. It keeps your muscles from getting a bit sticky too. So they kind of glide as you contract and relax them. Keeps your joints more lubricated. It helps that fluid in your joints work. There's so many benefits. Cognitively, having enough water in a day, it helps your brain work more efficiently.
Yeah,
it's amazing what water does, and consistently having enough of it. If you just kind of 1 or 2 times a week drink more water than usual, you go, well, I sometimes drink more water. Your body is just peeing it out.
Yeah,
it's got to be consistent. Otherwise it's excess, and your body's not going to put in the effort of using that extra stuff and then have to readapt later. It just goes, oh, this is extra, get rid of it.
right.
So the key is you're going to have to visit the washroom a couple extra times for about 3 days when you increase your water intake.
Yeah.
And then after that, your body's a bit of a sponge. It adapts. and then it starts to actually hold on to that water and use it.
Huh.
Okay.
Right.
Now, any other questions on airway tightness or air trapping?
I find sometimes just anxiety causes it.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. That anxiety, it can cause those bronchospasms as well. I guess I didn't charge these enough. So it can cause those bronchospasms. So again, when your bronchial spasm, you're not getting that smooth airway. It's constricting how well you can inhale and exhale. That's where you get into that wheezing, that
I
kind of.
can't hear you very well.
I can't hear you that well either.
Sorry.
We can't hear you very well. When you took those buds out.
Yeah. Muting myself won't help. Is this a little bit better?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a lot
That's
better,
better.
Jim.
Jill, that's a bronchospasm. I've just had it once, and I went past a trigger. A fellow was having a smoke, and like I smoked a lot, but I just went past him at the library, and just like that, everything completely ceased. I couldn't get anything in or out.
Mhm.
And I just got my legs going to get away. But I don't know, like, what measures can you take if you find yourself in that situation? Because I couldn't seem to make anything move to breathe.
Yep. So if it's a case of those bronchospasms, that airway tightness, often most of you will have been prescribed some sort of a bronchodilator.
You know?
And there's a couple different ones, but most of you, all of you should really have, especially if you've ever experienced a form of airway tightness, which I would safely assume you all have.
Yeah.
And I would safely say that you should all have up to date, meaning it's not expired, because you'd be shocked at how many people tell me that, well, I've got my inhaler and I look at it and it's 4 years past its expiration. You should have a bronchodilator.
But you have to inhale it, and you can't in a spasm.
I see what you mean. Yep. Again, there's a couple different ones, and I'm not the best person to ask about the different types of bronchodilators. I know enough to say that there's different ones that have different mechanisms of use. Some of them are more in droplets. Some of them are more powder based. So it's just they react differently with how quickly they're absorbed and for when they're supposed to be used. I would highly encourage you to talk to your respiratory therapist or pulmonary specialist that you have access to, or your family doctor, because they know a lot better about that specific stuff than I do. I can only
Just a
direct you
one-time
back to
event,
the person.
just a one-time event, but finally I had a place, didn't even realize I had the question, what if it ever happens again? And for
Right.
some people, it may not be a one-time event, it may happen occasionally.
Yeah, and again, there are probably definitely things you can talk to your doctor about in terms of options. There might be, now don't take my word for this, because I already told you, the pharmacology stuff I'm a little bit behind on, because that's not what I deal with. But there might even be something similar to an EpiPen. If you have a severe situation like that where you cannot breathe at all, you might be able to get access to some sort of an emergency use EpiPen, which works on that hyperactivity, that hyperreactiveness, right, for those bronchospasms.
Oh, that's what it relieves, eh? So that would be perfect.
Yeah.
It opens the airways.
Again, talk to your family doctor,
Yeah.
talk to your respiratory therapist.
Right, okay.
I'm just saying that there's more options. If you're in a situation where you can't take your bronchodilator, well, you need a backup option. You need an emergency plan B. And having those plans in place, gang, and I'm pretty sure BC Lung has put on a couple wonderful webinars from some experts
on having your kind of emergency action plan. You know, you should have a plan in place for when things go downhill, for when you have that moment of, I can't breathe, like this isn't normal for me. It's one of those kind of more extreme events, right?
Right.
And get prepared. You know, times of high pollen, you should have a plan in place of what to do if suddenly that pollen triggers a more severe reaction than you're used to. And if you got a plan in place, it is much easier dealt with.
Darn, I've never thought of it that way. And I thought I had an action plan, but it wasn't for that sudden wham.
And
at all,
unfortunately, that
you know?
sometimes happens. You can be as prepared as you think you can be,
Yeah.
and something might still happen, you know, and now you just got to learn from it.
Hey, thanks, Joe.
Well, I think we all have Ventolin. That's the one that
Yeah.
is
Yep.
fast paced. And I don't go anywhere without that. So Clancy said she couldn't breathe, but I mean, obviously she could because she was able to walk away. But if you can walk away, then you can take a quick puff or a few puffs of your Ventolin, and I should.
When I got to the door,
That would hope.
Good idea, Marie.
it ceased
Yeah.
and I could breathe, and I have my Ventolin all the
Good.
time, and it's my daily dosage too. But if I'd had to walk further, I would have just gone down. It's kind of like a quick scurry to the door.
For sure.
Yeah.
But of course, I never wanted to think about it, so I never dealt with it by saying, what kind of plan can I have if it ever happens again?
That's right.
You have
So
to
make
use that
sure-
Ventolin right away.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Maybe just even spraying it to the back of your throat helps
It works. It
to some
does.
extent, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go. So, you know, the key message here, gang, is just have that plan in place and have a plan for kind of each of those factors that we've talked about. Have a plan for air trapping. Okay, we constantly go over our recovery position. Make sure you can actually do it properly so that you feel a difference.
Mhm.
Right? So if you all just sit up tall and take in 2 of those deeper breaths, do it with me now. So sit up tall, breathe in and out, and then in and out. Okay, now I want you to lean over, but keep that chest up. So lean over, that chest is up, and your hands are on your thighs or your elbows. Maybe some of you need to stand, but get in this position and do 2 breaths.
Wow.
What's the difference,
Oh, yeah.
right? That recovery position should feel a lot easier to take that breath in
Mhm.
because it sets you up to open up those airways and to allow those ribs to relax and open up. Okay, and that's why we
Right.
talk about those kinds of things. Make sure you've got you're familiar with your recovery position and you're familiar with that recovery breathing out through pursed lips. Make sure you've got a plan for the airway tightness and inflammation. So times where make sure you have something for increased mucus, either some sort of a decongestant or there's a couple different things that help with too much mucus. Okay, make sure you have something for those bronchospasms, both a kind of a maintenance thing and an emergency thing, right? And the other last factor that I want to talk to you, and then we'll get into some movement, is you might just be pushing past lungs capacity.
Past what?
Past your lungs capacity.
Okay.
So, you know, who's ever either gone on too long of a walk or upstairs or have done too many stand-up sit downs from your chair, and boy, your legs are tired.
Right.
They feel kind of jelly. right? Where little leg muscles just feel like, oh, they don't want to do anything at all.
Right.
Okay, or who's had a muscle cramp later in the day, you know, which sometimes is caused by working that muscle too hard past its comfortable capacity. You can do that with your lungs. Okay.
Oh,
So kind of understanding where you are. And again, when we talk about the rating of breathlessness, 0 to 10, 10 out of 10 breathlessness is not being able to do anything at all. Stick around the 5 or 6, don't get past that. Right?
have a rest.
Yeah, so you gotta kind of know your capacity and work within it. Peter, are you okay?
Having a snooze.
That's okay. A snooze is okay. You're
Hi,
okay,
Peter.
though?
You're having a nap?
Perfect. Good. You're allowed to have a snooze, guys, but if I notice, I'm just gonna make sure you're okay. That's all. So what you can take out of that is that I'm keeping an eye on all of you.
Good eye, Jill.
That's good to know.
Thank you.
Yes.
Of course, of course, of course. Okay, any questions on that last piece, the lung capacity piece? Did I explain that well enough?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, actually, I'm just gonna quickly add to it, just in a way of we talked about, I gave you the example of your leg muscles. Well, remember, you've got your breathing muscles too. You've got those intercostal muscles which attach to your rib cage, and their job is to pull open the rib cage as you breathe in and to pull close the rib cage as you breathe out, and your diaphragm, which sits underneath the rib cage. Those muscles, you build up their capacity to do work as well. Okay, so sometimes those muscles get too tired, and now they're too tired to kind of do their full job, and that's where you can get that feeling of breathlessness too. Because breathing heavily is a bit of a strength workout for those lung muscles. Or breathing muscles, I should say, your respiratory muscles. That's the proper term. Okay, good. Any questions?
Let's go.
Let's go. Exercise time. Mary, ready. All right,
Get moving.
let's get moving. Make sure my timer is on here. All right, I'm gonna sit back on the bench. All right, so I want everyone being aware of that capacity piece. Gotta lower that just a little bit more.
We're
It's better
losing
when
your
you wear the
volume, Jill.
Pardon?
Where are the buds?
Oh, you're right. This is gonna be a bit challenging. I'm gonna sit closer then, but you're not gonna be able to see my feet as well. Because I did not pay attention to the charge on those earbuds, so they're gonzo. Sorry about that, team. Okay, let's get those arms starting to pump. Again, I want that chest up nice and tall. Is the volume manageable?
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. No, speaking of different factors of breathlessness and what impacts the breathing, geez, my voice muscles are fatigued from all this coaching the last few days. That's part of the problem too. I thought I was yelling so loud last night, and my players go, "Coach, are you angry? I didn't hear you on the field." And I go, "Oh." So as we go, gang, really focus on that steady breathing pattern. So again, we've got a shorter amount of time today. So maybe we'll just push super, super hard.
You just told us not to.
I know. Okay, rest those arms. So again, I'm sorry you cannot see my feet, but I'm gonna cross one ankle over the other and then uncross it. My foot crosses over and uncrosses. Maybe I can just adjust that. So it crosses and uncrosses, crosses and uncrosses. Go at your pace. And remember, all these exercises you can do standing or seated. Cross, uncross, cross, uncross. Still focusing on that breathing pattern. There we go, team.
You're sitting on an exercise ball.
You're right. I have my bench set up behind me, but if I go that far away, then we won't be able to hear my voice. Or unless I pull out my coaching voice, but nobody wants that. Trust me. All right, resting those legs now. If you can, and it feels okay for your body, I want your one leg to go back behind you or turn sideways in your chair. And holding that position with your legs, we're now going to lift the arms up and down. You should feel a slight pull at the front of those hips. And remember, if that overhead movement doesn't feel good, then feel free to just open up wide. Okay, so if your shoulders or neck do not like the overhead, open up wide. Otherwise, we're reaching up. While maintaining a steady breathing pattern. All right, switch which leg is behind if you are choosing to do that. And again, we're lifting up and down. Maintain that breathing, team. Excellent. Now we're moving. This will wake everybody up. Nice work, gang. And rest there. All right. So now what I want everybody to do is I want you, if you can, to hold one knee up in the air. Okay, so I promise I am holding a knee up, and we're just going to punch one hand at a time in front of us. So I would like you to maintain that steady breathing pattern. Remember, based off of your level of energy and level of breathlessness today, you might need to do just a couple and then stop and breathe. Find an intensity that is challenging yet doable for you. And we're switching which leg is up. There we go, team. Maintain that breathing. And rest. So now, working the legs mostly. Now we're gonna get our leg kind of rotating the touch out to the side and back, which is different than opening it up. So we reach the toe to the side, that knee might rotate down and out a little bit. So touch that leg out to the side. Maybe you can actually see my feet. Boy, that's the last time I don't charge those earbuds. It's a good lesson in consequences.
It sounds so funny.
That's it. So reach that foot out to the side. If you are standing, make sure you don't transfer your weight to that leg. Keep the weight on one leg, stretch the other out. If you are standing. There you go. Keep up your breathing. And remember, you should be able to keep breathing in a full breath. Keep around that kind of 5 out of 10 on the breathlessness scale. All right, so rest those legs and now take your arms, open them up wide, squeeze your shoulder blades together and we're up and down. Again, talking about intensity, if you feel like this isn't a challenge, add a couple weights or try going a little bit quicker within your body's capability. But keep those shoulder blades squeezed together. That's right, I like some of you are listening to your bodies. Okay, so this is better for your sore shoulders or neck if they don't like that overhead. Great job, gang. And rest those arms. And now I want you just touching one foot out in front of you at a time. So touch out in front of you, one leg, and then the other. If you are standing, I'd like you to walk forwards and backwards. 1, 2, 1, 2, if you can. Make sure that core stays tight, gang. And make sure you can maintain that steady breathing. And if you realize that we haven't taken a break yet, I apologize. I've had coffee today.
Well, we didn't.
Good.
And I don't normally do that. So keep up that breathing. All right, rest those legs, arms out to the side, and we're making the bigger the circle, the more intense it is, right? Increased range of motion. That sore on the shoulders, go from just the elbow. It's kind of like we're skipping a rope. Ah, the double Dutch days, hey?
Oh, yes.
So again, go within your capacity. Remember those factors of intensity. Find what is challenging yet doable for you. Still able to take in that deep, full breath. Well, it might not be super deep, but a full breath. All right, rest those arms and we're marching the legs. So you can either get just the legs marching or you can get the arms involved as well. Depends if your arms need a break or not. Getting a sip of water is a great idea. Maybe some of you need to pause, focus on that recovery breathing. Maybe you need to go to your recovery position, okay? I'm sitting on an exercise ball and I really feel like it's giving me some exercise today.
Bouncy.
Bouncy ball.
Or the one, it was quite popular maybe 20 years ago. I don't know if they still are, but the ball, and it had a handle and kids would just bounce around.
Oh, that sounds great.
Up that breathing, gang. All right, rest there. You're getting close to stretching, so get the knees out wide. Take your hands and we're gonna move. You can slowly rotate as long as your back feels good and rotate up and down. So mostly those hands are moving. You are welcome to use a small weight, but you have to make sure that core stays tight. So that core is doing the movement rather than your back. That core stays strong. So we might get a couple people jumping in who are still expecting that webinar today, and we'll make sure to tell them the bad news. I kidnapped the host so that I could have a full hour. And we're switching sides.
Did drinking coffee have anything to do with that?
For sure. It's
No.
dangerous for everybody.
When did you have this coffee?
Oh, around 8 or 9.
What did you have in it?
Chocolate milk. Coffee of champions.
That's long-lasting coffee, all right.
Oh yeah, I'm someone who can't have it past 2 p.m.'s pushing it. It'll impact my sleep and rest. Holy smokes, gang! Woo! Did we feel like we got the heart rate up?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Good.
definitely.
Yeah, we sure did. Oh my goodness. All right, let's take our arms. We'll start to slow it down. So remember that's getting into that recovery breath helps slow down our heart rate, bring back down our blood pressure. We're gonna reach up, slicking the hair back. Let's get those shoulders moving and only go within the range that feels good for you. Make sure that elbow stays in.
Okay.
You guys want another example of how important that pursed lip breathing is? Just read a really interesting study over the weekend on how that pursed lip breathing can help some people who are having an episode of AFib, which is atrial fibrillation, where the heartbeat gets kind of out of sync. Race,
Yeah.
skips a
Habit.
and across the body. Remember, if it gets pinchy, by lifting it up, just reach straight across. Yeah, so really interesting stuff, that pursed lip breathing. Because it tells your central nerve, other than the fact that it helps split open the airways, it tells your central nervous system to settle down, to go into its calm recovery state. So we're actually starting to see those breathing techniques being used with people in chronic pain, people suffering with anxiety, starting to see it in sports performance.
Yeah, recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And hands on the belly, pull open those hands, right? This is the hitchhiker.
If you're concentrating on the breathing, it makes you forget a lot of other things.
That too,
That's
yeah.
true.
So a meditative piece can be super, super helpful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially when you get some counting into it. So now you're kind of counting your inhale, counting your exhale.
That's sure down to basics.
Well, they say the brain has a hard time concentrating on two things at once. So if you're concentrating really hard on your breathing and you have pain somewhere, the pain will diminish just because your brain can't put all its effort into the pain. It's also having to use it somewhere else. I used that when I was giving birth, believe it or not. And it made a huge difference. A huge,
Absolutely.
huge
Yeah.
difference.
And stretch one leg out in front of you, gang. Reach towards your toes. So that's very true. When you are in pain, your brain focuses. It kind of hones in. And in chronic pain, which means it's 6
Hey, I'll have
months.
to phone you back.
Your brain actually dedicates more brain space on that area of your body. So the way your neurons, your brain neurons are programmed, more of them are now focused on that part of your body in pain. So Maureen, switch legs. Maureen's absolutely right. From the mental piece, it kind of takes away from that focus on the pain. And on a central nervous system piece, you are all familiar with your fight or flight, right? You get all activated, we're ready to exercise, let's go. Your nervous system is telling your heart rate to increase, your blood pressure to increase, we need your breathing to increase, we need all these things to happen to work, go, go, go. That calm recovery breathing or that focused recovery breathing sends signals to go from your fight or flight, which is what happens when you're in pain, into your rest digest. So that slow, okay, I'm in a recovery state, lower the heart rate, lower the breathing and blood pressure. It's twofold. It's amazing stuff. Really, really great. Okay, relax that leg. What are we needing to stretch, gang? Give me an area of your body that's been feeling sore or tight.
Your
Back.
quad.
Between my shoulder blades.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. If you are able to comfortably stand, I want you just to stand and put your hands on your chair or up higher. And you're just gonna slowly rock your hips back and forward. And that's gonna gently stretch out your back and your chest. Okay, so it's rocking those hips back and forwards. If you're not comfortable standing, then all I want you to do actually is I want you to breathe in. So get into that recovery position and then breathe in and slowly round that back up and breathe out to a flat back. Breathe in to gently round, breathe out to flat. How are those press backs feeling, guys?
They're feeling.
Yeah, so make sure you're being gentle with them. Slow and be gentle. And how does the breathing and rounding feel? Okay, rest there. Let's take that slow, deep breath in. So you can put your hand on your belly and breathing in, 2, 3, 4, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Last one in, 2, 3, 4, out through pursed lips, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Shake it up. Well done, everybody.
All right.
Jill.
Excellent, excellent job. You guys did amazing today.